In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to lose fat in a way that a 5-year-old could understand it. 2 words, calorie deficit. So what the hell is a calorie deficit? A calorie deficit is achieved when we eat fewer calories than our bodies burn for long periods of time, and so we start to burn from our body's fat stores. Now, in order to do this correctly, you're gonna need to follow 4 steps. Number 1 is finding your maintenance calories and then creating a deficit from those calories. Number 2 is determining your macronutrient ratios. Number 3 is coming up with meals that allow you to easily and enjoyably hit those numbers. And lastly, you just have to continue tracking your food and your weight long enough in order to actually see progress. Now that we've got the basics down, let's go ahead and run through an example of this with myself. Okay, so there's a lot of different calculators out there that you can Google and use to find your maintenance calories and then create a deficit from there. But this calculator that I'll be showing you here today is the most accurate one that I've ever used. I got it from Muscle Nerds. They're awesome if you've never heard of them before, so go check them out. All you're gonna need for this is the calculator itself, a body tape measure, as well as a body weight scale. So if you wanna get your hands on this calculator here, go ahead, just leave a comment down below. Now, what you're gonna need to do, you're gonna measure your body weight, measure your height, measure your neck, and measure your waist. And the ladies also go ahead and measure your hip circumference there as well. Now all you have to do is plug those numbers into the calculator in that top section there. Now this calculator came in centimeters and kilograms, so metric. So I created this little section here on the side for imperial to add in pounds and inches and that sort of stuff. So if you enter in the yellow box there, it'll go ahead and do those calculations for you. Now for the activity level here, if you're not really sure which one to pick, there's a little chart there on the left-hand side. And if you're not sure, if you're kind of in between or not really sure which one to pick, go ahead and be conservative and choose something on the lower end to start. You can always change this down the road if you're not seeing progress. And once you plug all that stuff in, you're now left with your maintenance calories, or the calories necessary to maintain your current weight based on all your information above. From here, we're gonna determine a calorie deficit, and I'd recommend somewhere between 10 and 15% of a calorie deficit, but make sure you don't go below the minimums on the left-hand side of the calculator there. All right, so now that you've determined how many calories you need to eat in order to create a calorie deficit so you can actually start losing fat, now it's time to allocate those calories into different macronutrient ratios. So when determining macronutrient ratios, we wanna always start with protein, because protein is the most important macronutrient when it comes to building and maintaining muscle, losing fat, as well as just keeping you full in between meals, which is gonna be important when you're trying to lose fat and creating a calorie deficit. So I typically recommend anywhere from 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, if you have a lot of weight to lose, then you might want to go even a little bit lower than that, or base this off of your fat-free mass, which you can find there in the calculator as well under FFM. Now, allocating carbs and fats for most people isn't really necessary. As long as you're hitting your daily calorie number and your daily protein number, it doesn't really matter how many you have of each. As long as you're hitting the calories and the protein, the math will work itself out. However, that being said, fat has over twice as many calories per gram as carbohydrates. So if you're eating a diet that's a lot higher in fat than carbohydrates, the amount or the volume of food is gonna be smaller. And since we're already in a calorie deficit trying to lose fat, you might find yourself a little bit hungrier than if you were to increase the amount of carbohydrates compared to fat. But again, at the end of the day, as long as you're hitting your calories and your protein, you should be good to go. Last thing on fats is don't go below 0.66 grams of fat per kilogram of lean body mass. And that is also labeled there in the calculator and will turn red if you choose too few of fats. So just make sure that that number stays above 0.66. Okay, so the last part of the calculator here will break down your total daily calories and macros into meals, depending on how many meals you prefer to eat. Now, typically I would suggest anywhere between 3 and 5 meals. Doesn't really matter, just kind of depends on your preference. I wouldn't go much lower than that or much higher than that. All right, so now that you know how many calories and how many macros you need per meal, let's go ahead and hop on over to a tracking app and start inputting some meals. So for myself and my clients, I like to use Chronometer, but MyFitnessPal is another popular one. There's probably some other ones out there, but I'm gonna be walking you through Chronometer because that's what I use. and it's the best. So when putting together meals and Chronometer, or just in general, I kind of like to follow a basic 3-step process. And that is 1, start with protein. Base each meal around protein. And that's the first number you should try to fit in here when doing your macro math. Secondly is pick your fruit or vegetable to get the fiber, to get the voluminous food and the vitamins and minerals that are so beneficial from fruits and vegetables. And lastly is choose a main carb source. Now, we're not gonna specifically choose a fat because most foods or sauces and cheeses and and toppings have plenty of fat in there. And typically people don't have a hard time getting enough fat. Typically it's too much. Okay, so for breakfast, I'm going to have the smoothie that I have every day because 1, it's delicious, and 2, it hits all these targets and I don't have to think about what I'm having for breakfast that day, which is a huge plus. And we know how much protein, carbs, and fats I need based on the calculator above, so it's really easy just to plug this in. Boom, breakfast is done. Moving on to lunch. I'm just gonna plug in some chicken thighs, green beans, and jasmine rice. And moving on to dinner, I'm gonna make a salmon teriyaki stir fry with some mixed vegetables there. Now, what's really cool about Chronometer, and a lot of these other apps I'm sure can do it well, is that you can save these meals as recipes. So instead of every time that you go to prepare this meal, you have to enter in each individual ingredient, you can go ahead in there and select all the meals or all the foods for that meal and save it as a recipe. And then you can just type in the recipe name and there it is. And then in Chronometer specifically, you can go ahead and what they call explode the recipe. So you get each individual ingredient in there in case you have a different portion size, maybe made it bigger, maybe made it smaller, maybe changed this ingredient for that ingredient or whatever. It makes it super easy and I encourage you to do this if you're using one of these apps. And the last step to fat loss is just continue tracking your food and your weight long enough in order to see progress. A realistic rate of weight loss is anywhere from 0.5% to 1% of your body weight per week, which you can also find on the right-hand side of the calculator here as well. So for myself, if I wanted to lose 10 pounds, that would take me somewhere between 5 and 8 weeks if everything's going as it should. This also is a really helpful guide that you can kind of check in on week to week to make sure that you are in fact moving closer to your goals. So there you have it, a step-by-step guide to losing fat. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you went ahead and liked it down below, and as well as consider subscribing because apparently that's really helpful or something. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video and we'll see you in the next one. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you liked it and considered following me. But other than that, we'll see you in the next one.